Thank you for this opportunity to speak here. You can see that I'm from Stellenbosch University in the Western Cape, and you also know that it's very dry there. So I'm very tempted to take all these bottles of water with me and go and sell it for a profit in the Western Cape. You see that I'm going to speak about the future of public engineering. Now, I tried to interpret what public engineering really means, and I put two connotations to that. So I'm going to speak in terms of two ways. One, for me, public engineering means actually the role of the engineer in the client-owner environment. And then also the other one, for me, a little bit different from that, but every engineer should be also public. So I'll get back to that. So the role of the engineer as a leader in society. All right, so I'm going to talk, first I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on what is engineering, trying to motivate and get to what I'm going to say about the role of the public engineer, and then talk about specific current industry challenges to show what the engineer as leader in public should be able to do. So that's where my emphasis will be. Now, this morning we heard the CEO from Sanral giving excellent examples of how infrastructure brings communities together and improve environments and provide economic opportunities. And that really ties in with my slide where I say that engineering is more than a profession. It's about building bridges between people and societies. And I remember when I was a very young engineer, my first employment was to work for a contractor. And just after graduation, I arrived there at the company and was introduced to the contractor on site, and he said to me, "Here our aim is to make money, and the fact that we build roads and bridges in the process is purely coincidental." And I want to turn that actually on its head. I think we serve society and we want to improve society and build the country, and the fact that we build roads and bridges in the process, that's purely coincidental. So I think for us as engineers, whether you're civil or any other discipline, we've got a unique opportunity to serve society. So just a little bit back, when we at the university try to explain to school leavers and learners what engineering is, and specifically civil engineering, we like to show, nice big projects. We show pictures of tall structures, and we show dams and roads and geotechnical things and say that is what engineering is. So we focus very much on the technical content of things, and in fact that is in a way reflected in the way that we teach as well. And I think engineering in the past has been very much like that. Undergraduate, we focus on the yellow things, which are the disciplines, and we look at the basic sciences behind that. And I think that's the way engineers have been taught, or civil engineers at least have been taught over many years, the basic sciences. But as the years have gone by, the last 20, 30 years, we started understanding there are many other things that play a role. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are many softer issues and things that we start touching at undergraduate level when we teach. But the profession is much more than just the technical knowledge that we have. And so when we sell the profession to school leavers and also to the public at large, we should be careful to only focus on technical things and say this is what the profession is, because the profession is much more than just that. And you will also see later on that more and more, so if we talk about the future of engineering, there's a real need for engineers to get involved in all these other matters, to embrace diversity and make use of that, to look at multidisciplinary collaboration, to be able to communicate and share information and not work in your own silo. So more and more the expectations of engineers are to do that. And what's so difficult about that is at university we've barely got time to cover the basic sciences, and where do we need to get into this? So that's one of the dilemmas that we have as a profession, is that in fact I think that the profession is exploding and they're expecting more of us, but we haven't got time at tertiary level, education level, to address all of that. And therefore opportunities such as this, where there's continued professional education, one should really embrace that, and that each one of us should actually get more people to attend things like this so that we can really understand what the profession is all about. So just before I then get to the role of the public engineer, I first went to what EXA says engineering is. And many of you are either busy with registration at EXA, or you've done that, or you will start thinking about that. But we know that EXA says that engineering is a process where you require fundamental and specialized engineering knowledge. Okay, those are more or less what we do at university in those yellow blocks that I had at the top. Those are the basic sciences. And that's the foundation of engineering. We can't do without that. But then it goes further. It says that we need to find solutions that are not obvious, that need to be outside the scope of standards and codes. That's a bit interesting, isn't it? Require information from a variety of sources, and then that we should merge technical and other aspects so that we can address affected parties. So if you really look at that, our profession is actually working against that. Now, our profession thinks that we have that, and that often we will just apply this, because I think very often in the consulting environment, we get so much pressure from client side that people start trying to just make a living. They need to go to simplified methods more and more. They use information from previous projects, they use standards and codes, they look it up on the table, and the real thinking and the real engineering is not really taking place. So we must, as a profession, be careful that we're not minimizing our role anymore. This is what we're supposed to be doing. We need to solve complex problems outside of the scope of normal things. So that is what engineering is really like. And I think we must sell ourselves as a profession, but that's the type of things that we really would like to do. I like this quote that I once came across from Bill Harvey. I've got no idea who Bill Harvey is, but I love the quote, and I'll read that. He said, "Engineering is not science. The scientist, concerned only with how things work, can always reduce the problem a little further until it becomes understandable. An engineer is forced to create new artifacts using inadequate knowledge. As with any art, the art of engineering feeds on science, but is not limited by it." So I always say that inadequate knowledge is not because you got 50% in your test and now you've got inadequate knowledge. That inadequate knowledge is because you don't know what the loads are, or you don't know the material characteristics, or you don't know what the future environmental conditions would be. So we don't have all the answers, but life goes on, and society expects us to deliver a bridge and to put it out there. So sometimes we need to take a decision and carry on. So we can't always go just to science and find a unique answer. We need to take that step further. And that is my message always, well, to myself, but also to young engineers, is to look out for this other part. That first part is easy. You can read that in a textbook. You know, that's why you don't attend class. You know, as students sitting here, you don't attend class because it's in the textbook.
This presentation is done at various places to various audiences. So if it appears to be a bit generic, it is indeed. I will, however, try to make it as interesting, but also as succinct as possible. I do realize time is not on our side at this stage. And now I actually am experiencing a senior citizen moment, is that what you call it? The fact that I studied at Rao is an indication that I'm indeed not a young professional. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, my focus would be on the identification of work process, but before I get into that, I would like to just briefly explain to you what the Council for the Built Environment is and who we are. Some of you may not know. You are well aware of EXA, your professional body. EXA is one of the 6 professional councils, and the CBE is an overarching body, meaning that we coordinate a number of the functions performed by the councils. We do not register people, we do not assess or accredit programs, and we do not discipline people, but we do act as an appeal body. So if there is a decision taken by any of the councils that anybody is aggrieved with, for instance, a failure or a refusal to register a person, the CBE is indeed the body where you come to in order to appeal that decision. Also where the CBE or the EXA rather may, there we are, may indeed where EXA would take a decision to discipline you, for instance, and you do feel that that discipline is inadequate, you can appeal to the CBE. Similarly, though, if EXA would refuse to discipline a person for an alleged breach of the code of conduct, you can likewise, as a member of the public, come to EXA and complain about that. I will briefly run through the purpose I'm explaining at the moment, the identification of work process. I will link with the contents of the Professions Act as well as the CBE Act. I will deal with the Competition Commission's view on identification of work. I will share with you the CBE's view on a way forward. I will share with you a definition for scope of work. And in the process, I'm going to continuously ask you to please see this as a first engagement. We do need your input in order to formalize that. I'm a lawyer, I'm not an engineer, and we actually don't have but one engineer at the CBE. So we do rely on input from the professionals in order to shape the scope of work. That will hopefully come to the fore during my discussion here. Then I'm going to propose to you an action plan to get to this process of identification of work and to try and get the process finalized. I will touch briefly on the guideline professional fees. When I get to that point, I will explain to you why my submissions on those would be very brief. And then, of course, we would like to open for questions. The identification of work process is actually embedded in the legislation of the 6 councils as well as the CBE. Now the process is to start where the councils will now start consulting very widely with a number of bodies and then identify the scope of work to be performed by a person registered in a certain category. And then the councils are supposed to make a recommendation to the CBE, and the CBE will then have to play their role, or its role, in order to get the process finalized. However, after the councils made their recommendations to the CBE, and that took a long time to formulate, when I joined EXA in 2007, that process was already underway. Some of you might have been in primary school at the time. That process was already underway, and around 2012, 2013, the CBE started then to submit to the Competition Commission exemption applications. And I need to explain to you how we got to the point where we actually had to apply for exemption from the provisions of the Competition Act. During this process, where the councils made recommendations to the CBE, the view was formed that the identification of work, as it was at the time envisaged, will actually amount to unfair competition and will be contrary to the spirit of the Competition Act and will therefore require exemption applications. And the CBE duly, in consultation with the council, started to prepare exemption applications to the Competition Commission. Those were submitted, the Competition Commission received those applications, and in terms of their internal process, they then started to investigate the applications. Around the end of 2014 about, the Competition Commission came back and they rejected all the applications. We were very surprised because during that investigation process that lasted about 2 years, we got the impression that the Competition Commission will indeed grant the applications, but they will put certain conditions to it. Some of the conditions we envisaged were that there will be a transitional period allowing people to enter the profession to register. There will also be, the exemption will be for a period of time, not endlessly. It will run out at a certain point and then we will have to come and reapply again. However, the Commission rejected all the applications. And initially they gave us very brief reasons. They published those reasons in the Government Gazette, and they were not going to any extent. So we contemplated a legal process. We felt that we should get the Commission to give us more information. We also felt that the Commission, in the process of investigating, did not follow certain procedures correctly, and we felt that in general they didn't apply their minds properly to the submissions made to them. But before we get to the point where we actually took them to the Commission Tribunal, when we informed them that we are about to now lodge this application, they turned around and they say, you can now resubmit your applications. So we were very happy about that. We thought, no, we can now fine-tune this. We can get it to the point where the Commission will be satisfied with it. The Commission also offered to go into a process of advocacy with us, taking us by the hand and take us through this process in order to ensure that it is a proper process. However, when we start asking the Competition Commission how this process will play itself out, what will the terms of reference be, what would the time frames be, because we were anxious about time and we are still anxious about time, the Commission became coy. They simply did not speak to us. So we were quite worried about that. We went back to our legal team and we say, what do we do now? And then they obtained advice from a very prominent Competition Commission advocate, and he advised us that you should actually go back to the basis of your legislation and not try to do something that is not permitted by your legislation. And that I will explain in a moment to you. So the Competition Commission eventually gave us some reasons. They only gave us reasons for Excel, but they explained to us that the reasons will basically be the same for all the councils.